Amelia Vogler, grounding and energy medicine specialist, and your host in the Energy Magazine exclusive interview series. Today, I'm joined by Kathy Barrow, who is a best-selling author. Speaker, consultant, advocate, Reiki practitioner, master teacher, integrative health coach, and cancer coach. And she's going to be sharing today from her lived experience about how to change the way that we look at chronic disease. Kathy has a tremendous story of healing through her remarkable recovery of two rare and aggressive forms of cancer. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Amelia. I'm so grateful to you.
Yeah.
This will be fun.
It will be fun. I've been so anticipating our time together. And I thought that I would presence our conversation a little bit in terms of like a chronological conversation so that we can kind of hear a little bit about from where you arrived ahead of your diagnosis, because it sounds like you imprinted strongly in the environmental advocacy world. You were nationally recognized for your work. You were the executive producer of a not one but two-time Emmy Award-winning documentary called Worth Fighting For. And I really believe life teaches us everything we need. So I'm curious about your advocacy work with the environment and your cancer journey, and wondering, what did you take with you, and what did you lean on, and what was that story about?
Do you know you are the very first person to make that connection? Most of the time, and I don't know if it's the day we live in or the person you are, but most of the time people aren't at all interested in my environmental work. And don't even know I did it, really. It's like I just came on the scene sick. So the environment, which really I consider like the ecosystem, right? It's what we live in. You can't kind of separate the environment and people. Like we live in this ecosystem and we are impacted by it one way or another. That was always known to me when I was young, really young, like 6, 7 years old. I would go out into the woods with a book and I would just sit there and wait for the little animals to come out. And, I was always by myself because everyone else, just couldn't be still. And then as I got older, I couldn't be still either. And the awareness of what was happening, I think it began with natural areas being taken up by buildings. That was when I first became aware of it. And then I have a degree in environmental science and journalism. It's a certificate from Madison, UW-Madison. And I really had a crash course in, the impact humans are having on the planet. And so from there, my work, I'm a chronic volunteer, I'm a chronic advocate, and as it turns out, I was chronic at being underpaid in all my jobs, because back then environmental advocacy just wasn't respected like it is today, or it's becoming more respected. And somehow I always found myself at Superfund sites and trying to help people around Superfund sites. I was the person at the gas station, covering my mouth because I didn't want to breathe in the benzene. I was vegan and vegetarian. I was vegan for about 4 years and then became vegetarian and, wrote legislation and, I was up on Capitol Hill trying not to get the door slammed in my face, and so it was really shocking to me. I spent a lot of time overseas and quite a bit in South Africa. And that was really the point at which I realized, I'm here helping them, but really there's so much to do at home. And so I went back home. We bought a farm, learned how to grow food sustainably. And then I was diagnosed. So apparently I wasn't, quite on my path yet, is how I look at it. I truly look at a diagnosis as a challenge, a little wake-up call. And I had, had little experiences here and there with energy work or alternative kind of treatments, however you want to phrase that. And I mean alternative, really I don't know what word we want to use anymore, but I never really believed in it, understood it. And then I was diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer and had a choice. So
And
that's what got me there.
in that moment, I want to kind of pause, because I think that in some ways, each of us listening has had the opportunity to bear witness to a diagnosis in some form. Perhaps it's with a friend, a loved one, a family member. But I'm curious what in that moment, what it was like for you to kind of receive that information. What was that like before you know what you know?
Yeah.
Like what happened?
I mean, so many things go through your mind. My kids were age 2 and 7 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I guess there was a lot of confusion for me. Like, I worked so hard to eat healthy. And that is a point I want to get around to in our conversation, because it isn't just about eating healthy. Staying healthy is not just about eating healthy. And so, I felt like I did everything sort of right, whatever that was. And I couldn't understand, like, how was I sick? And I was 41, it was really confusing. And then when I understood the depth of my illness, and that I was not expected to survive, I have this thing about me. If you tell me I can't do it, I'm probably just going to dig my heels in and do it. And so that applied to cancer as well. And I didn't really know the path, reminding everybody it was 2005. There was not an internet. Like, you could go to Amazon and buy a book, but that was about it. And so there weren't a lot of resources readily available for someone like me in the Midwest. How do I do this? Mm-hmm. And my husband got me Jack Kornfield's book, or Meditations. And I had Bell Ruth's Naprostack tapes, visualizing. And that was it. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to meditate, how to visualize, how to connect. And it was not an easy sell for me, because I had to give up my work. I had to give up my volunteer work. I had to focus just on this. And a busy mind, I've now learned, can be busy meditating. But back then, it was very hard for me to accept that I was doing something while trying to be, right? Trying to be present and connect. So it was a hard transition. And I did find that I had to let a lot of people go in my life. And I think that's tough. I think a lot of patients experience that, because for some reason, cancer is such a fear-provoking diagnosis, and nobody really knows how to deal with it. So some people make it all about them. Other people are overly generous, you know, they're like in your space all the time. So you have to find that balance of the people who ask you, what do you want? You know, what do you need? And that was also a tough transition. And that all happened, you know, right in those first few months.
Thank you, Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of beautiful wisdoms in there. And when you learned, for you, this is sort of a question for you, how to connect. I taught myself how to connect. I taught myself how to meditate. I taught myself how to visualize. What did those look like for you, those teachings?
Yeah.
How did you do that? Like if you were to tell
thank
somebody,
you.
hey, this is how to do it according to Kathy.
Thank you for asking that, because I am an integrative health coach and I do work with my clients on how to meditate.
Yeah.
And truly, I am a strip it down. And as I'm super pragmatic about everything I do because I don't have a lot of time to waste, I guess is where my mind was at. Like, I don't have a lot of time to see if this works or that works. You know, I have to find what works now and for me. And I will just say, even though I have a type A personality, I do tend to be a little lazy. Like, I want to take the easy way out. And so meditation for me is as simple as focusing on my breath, and how I describe it with my clients and how we practice it is when you breathe in, you say in your mind, and when you breathe out, you say out. And it is that simple. And then when you find your mind is drifting, you have a touchstone of words that aren't Sanskrit, they aren't chants, they aren't things that you have to, that might not be natural for you, because I think that's why a lot of people maybe dabble but never quite jump all the way in. And so I just find the simple words in and out are everybody's words. We can all focus on that. There's no, nothing's attached to that for people. And so it is the quickest and easiest way to get yourself in a meditative state. And that we start 2 minutes, then we might move to 4, you know, and I think it's really important for people to understand that meditation does not require 20 minutes, half hour, an hour, 2 minutes. The science is clear. 2 minutes makes a big difference in your brain. And so, but I also find, and for me, that at 2 minutes, it's very easy to stretch to longer and longer and longer because it's no longer a chore. It's not something you have to turn a tape on, you know, or tape. I just dated myself. Turn on an app, whatever. Like you are, it's you. So using that as a segue, what I teach is simple, attainable, sustainable. So if it's not simple and it's not attainable for you, so for example, do I have to go to a class to learn to meditate? Do I have to, you know, go somewhere to stretch? Do I have to go somewhere and I don't want to? Or maybe I don't have that extra money in my budget. You know, I can do it at home. It is attainable. And therefore, it will be sustainable. You will be able to continue it throughout your life. You will be able to develop a practice that works for you. And then if you choose to go and take classes or join groups, great. But for a lot of people, that's a tough sell right at the beginning. So that's really where, for me, that meditation grew into the connection. it's also during the, yeah. Well, and so it was through that I learned to be quiet enough to visualize, to scan my body, to look for where the disease was or wasn't, how the different things I was doing was impacting my health long term. And then I also learned during that time, and when I say learn, these are impressions that I received, by quiet and not having expectations, but just being open to whatever it was that came in. And that's when I learned the soul is always perfect. Some people would say, well, you have to heal your soul. And I would say, absolutely not. It's our mind, body, spirit that needs some work, but the soul is always perfect. And when we work on our mind, body, spirit, that's the connect to our soul. That's when our heart fully opens. That's when we can move through our days in a state of peace. We might not always feel joy, we might not always feel positive, but we have that space of peace that we can always come back to. So that was what I learned.
Thank you. I just, and I'm so sorry for interrupting you. I get so excited.
Oh, sorry.
I get so excited, but I want to reflect back how the way that you introduced yourself in this practice, you said, I'm type A, but I'm lazy. And then you sighed. Type A, in. Data in, but I'm lazy. Out. Sigh. Space. And I thought, as you were telling us about this simple, attainable, sustainable practice, I was hearing that in right as you on the other side and thinking, feeling, experiencing you really being claiming and embodying this very simple teaching. And I just wanted to call that to presence, because there's that wonderful alignment of being, living, experiencing. Mm-hmm. And that's what I hear from your story, this story of claiming. And I'm wondering now, as we drift in time into present moment or even into futuring, what are your favorite cornerstone practices now? What does that look like? Is it the same? Has it evolved?
Yeah, it's basically the same. Again, the term lazy comes back up because my practice is not as intense as it used to be. Uh-huh. I'm clear of cancer. It'll be 18 years in October 2023. And so I have wiggle room. And I am, and I tell this to my clients often, they feel daunted by having to change the way they eat, having to adopt a practice of stress release and stress management, and then deepening that spirituality aspect of ourselves. And it feels daunting, like it's not forever. Like that, and the reason I say it like that is because once you've practiced it for a period of time, it kind of is forever. So, but if you say that right off the bat, somebody who's been diagnosed, it's like, oh, forget it, just forget it. And it's like, no, once you get beyond disease, you know what you need to do to stay healthy. 60% of us suffer from some form of chronic illness. That's insane.
Yeah.
And the reasons go back to why I did my original environmental work to begin with. We never talk about how to prevent it, but the majority of cancers, something like 90 to 95% of cancers, are not genetic based. They come from, smoking, poor choices in our lifestyle, poor choices of food, poor quality of food, heavy chemical burden. So it's not our fault, except that we continue to accept that as the norm. And that means our, person is injured every day. And of course, the number one reason people go bankrupt in the United States is healthcare costs. So, this is something that everyone can do. It does not involve a juicer. It does not involve, specialty diets. It's just about learning how to use food as medicine along with the stress and the spiritual connection, because that's where the messages of how to move through our day continue. I call it intuitive eating, or eat with the intention to heal, is being connected to what your body needs, not what your brain wants. Yeah. Right? Like, and so that's food as medicine. Yeah. And food as medicine is not removing, whole groups of food from our diet. That's not sustainable. Mm-hmm. It's not simple either. And for many, it's not attainable. So it's just learning how to, work with those foods that we love anyway, adding more vegetables, definitely nothing processed, no sugar, Can you have a glass of wine? Yes, of course you can have a glass of red wine. Should you be downing bottles of vodka? Of course you already know the answer to that, right? So it's just, it's just reconnecting to self-love. Like, if I love myself and I want to be here, I'm going to make choices for myself that are not hard to make. For me now, at nearly 18 years, if I go out to a restaurant, I'm going to eat what I want to eat. And some people, if I run into somebody, they might be, oh, you're eating that? Yep. Yeah. I'm eating out. I can eat what I want. And then I know the next day I'm going to have a bunch of pineapple. It's going to help me detox. I'll have my milk thistle and my dandelion root, it'll help move things through. But it's learning that, how do we take care of our bodies in a world that seemingly we don't have a lot of control over.
Yeah, Kathy, for our listeners, you're so in the flow of, I was just about to ask you, what about, you've talked about food and eating and, what is food as medicine? And so you've introduced that. And I just want to share with our watchers, listeners, you have authored an incredibly vulnerable, very raw, that's a very intentional word, memoir based on your journals from your cancer journey. The memoir is called Eat, an Unconventional Decade in the Life of a Cancer Patient. And you've spoken a little bit about food as medicine. And I would love for you to share a little bit about the process of journaling and what you were learning, and how did this perspective, this personal perspective of food as medicine come to be in your life?
Yeah, so I called the book EAT because it's an acronym. It's Evolve, Advocate, Transform. Evolve into your own self-advocate and transform your being. And I noted, in looking back through my journals, that's some number of years after that first decade, I kind of looked back at my journals and I was like, wow, totally forgot about this. Completely forgot about that. I recommend, even people going through the world, even if you don't have a chronic illness, just journal. And the reason why I find it so important is, one, it's a memory for us. It's a memory bank. We can't possibly remember all of the joys in our life, or all of the struggles we've overcome, or all the challenges that we rose up, and overcame. Like, it's not possible. We don't have enough bandwidth in our brain. So for me, I am a writer anyway. And I was not good at the support groups that they offer for cancer patients. That wasn't not that I was positive all the time. I wasn't, but I needed to not be with negative all the time. And so I found, in lieu of someone to talk to about how I was feeling, I used my journals. And so I just started writing. And some days there might be 2 or 3 sentences. Some days there could be pages. And before I know it, an hour's gone by, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I really have to do other things. But it really was an outlet for me to share my experiences, my feelings, my thoughts, my plan. Okay, I didn't like the way my doctor responded to me about this, so next time this is what I'm going to do. It was whatever. Sometimes it was just a mindful recognition of the beauty happening outside. It just was whatever. Sometimes it was throwing up gratitude. And I want your viewers and your listeners to know that expressing gratitude, just one expression of gratitude, small, like I'm so grateful for the wind blowing through the pine trees out my window, spreading the essential oils, which are healing. That one piece of gratitude decreases stress hormones by 42% in that moment. 42%. So, that is such a simple act to bring our stress levels down. And so through my journaling, I was also practicing expressing gratitude. So that's how I use them. And then I realized there was a story there. And the reason, I did a lot of speaking. I started an organization with our hospital. I just realized that I couldn't help enough people just speaking. It just wasn't possible. And my kids were still small. And so I thought, a lot of people had asked me to write my book, because oftentimes when you speak, it's an hour and you can't possibly cover everything, right? So I decided to write the book, and I purposefully did not write it as a self-help. I purposefully wrote it as my story, what I went through, and what no one should ever have to go through in our medical system. And some people, they say, well, you're talking about natural healing, but you went through this. That's true. I would have died without, with the cancer that I had, without having my medical community. However, there was also a time at which I realized, okay, I've had enough. Thank you for buying, for slowing things down, for me to learn what I need to learn to go the rest of the way. But I really want to encourage, all of us to ask for more, from our medical community. There's a Dr. Dean Ornish, who's well known for his work in helping people with cardiac issues heal through lifestyle medicine. And he, in the last, I don't know, however many years, 8 years, finally got Medicare to accept it as a reimbursable expense. Therefore, doctors can now offer it. Why in the world is that not a reimbursable expense for a GP, anybody, working with patients? It's ridiculous in our system that, okay, well, it's okay for heart disease, so now we have to, go through a whole nother 20 years. It took them 20 years to get there. So lifestyle medicine, it's really where we need to be, and we need to be preventing chronic illness so that people don't have, the extreme treatments that I went through and others go through. And I will say that Harvard is in the throes of a study. It's called the NEAR study, NEER, which is something around enigmatic responders. Basically, it means we should have died and didn't. And they're wondering why 100 of us who had cancers that we should have died from didn't. And it turns out we all basically did the same thing, which is stunning. So if 100 of us, had the same results, some people in the study did no conventional treatment whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And others did a combination like me. So, yeah. So that's why I wrote it. Just like, come on, we have to do better for each other.
And you've mentioned your relationship to complementary modalities, and you've mentioned your relationship to food. And mm-hmm. So I'm curious about the NEAR study, and you saying, we all did about the same thing. What did that look like? What was that? I know that it's not just food. There's something else.
Right.
So what is it? What is it that you did?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing is you take control of your health and you be part of your team, right? Yeah. I think conventionally, the generation before me, our doctors were all knowing and deserving of respect. I can remember my parents calling peers, same age group doctors, doctor. Mm. Or we could just call him John, because that's actually his name, if you're out socializing, right? And demystify this, because the medical community is, obviously incredibly important to helping us manage certain conditions. But they're a person like anyone else, and they have a limited view, especially today when it's specialists. Everybody's a specialist, which in some ways really benefits us. In other ways, maybe it's not the best. So be a part of your team, ask questions, encourage your doctor to look things up for you. When I was diagnosed, and I was, reading research and talking to scientists, and I would go to my doctor and I would say, read this and tell me why it wouldn't be good for me to try. And then he'd come back and he'd say, can't find a reason, you should try it, or this is why. Most people don't challenge their doctors, and there are doctors who don't like to be challenged. And so it's important to remember that that's ego. That has nothing to do with your question or the quality of your question or the quality of your concern. That's just an ego response. Because remember, no question is dumb. So don't be afraid to push on that. We all radically changed our diet. And again, what that means is not eating with, having good nutrition. It's learning how to use food as medicine. So eating 10 to 15 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, but specific ones, like kale, but only 3 times a week. Kale and spinach, I shouldn't have even started there. Most people are like, I have kale every day. It's like, no, that kidney stones, and spinach and kale, no more than 3 servings a week. But lots of dark leafy grains like Swiss chard and collards and dandelion and arugula and romaine, and doing onions and garlic and leeks, and just really familiarizing yourself with everything in the produce section. Limit you have more vegetables than fruit, whole grains, sprouted grains, so healthy for us. The keto diet, forget about it. Just forget about it. The raw food diet, I'm sorry, I'm sure that there are listeners, but the raw food diet is not a healthy diet. We cannot access the nutrients in most raw produce that we eat. Carrots, it takes 30 minutes to cook before you actually break the cell walls down in order to absorb the nutrients. So like understanding how do I use food in a way that supports my body. Following your intuition, right? I mean, if you have a feeling and it feels supported, then follow it. Don't let others question it. Don't question it, you know? I mean, healthy questioning, but if it's a crazy idea, no. But using herbs as well as food. So well seasoning your foods, lots of thyme, rosemary, oregano, sage, parsley, you know, whatever you love. Use those herbs wildly in your food. It'll taste a lot better. Supplements are one, it's such a trend, right? Well, it's been a trend for a decade. And it's really, it's meant to make money is the bottom line. So use supplements sparingly. They're not meant to be used forever and ever unless you have a medical reason for it, right? So for example, in the North, we don't get a lot of sun in the winter time. So taking vitamin D3 is really important. And most of us are short on vitamin D3. And it is a hormone that we require to run lots of different things in our body. So, you know, it's understanding what we really need and what we can get from food. Another one would be pro and prebiotics. No, don't take those unless you need them. Eat the food that is pre and probiotic. Don't suppress your emotions, you know, release them and embrace social support. Identify what your reasons are to live. Why are you here? The really strong ones, like what do you want to do? And try to increase positive emotions, though that's not one that, there's not a real correlation between positive emotions and surviving cancer, for example. Deepening your spiritual connection, and then, that's a repeat. Identify strong reason to live. I must have made an impression on me. I put it on twice. So those are basically the things that we all did.
Yeah, lovely. It reminds me of where we started our conversation, advocating for the environment.
Huge.
You know, being in love with the world around us in a way that we want to protect it and bring it into our own body and protect that, create that relationship.
And reminding the audience here today, like take a look at on my website under news, there's a blog and I've got some articles there, not a ton because I mostly with clients, but there's one there about force bathing or Shinrin Yoku. And we can all enjoy being in nature. And the more of us that enjoy it, the more we want to protect it, right? And the benefits that we receive from just walking through a forest or even sitting and breathing are insane. So much so that NASA took those studies and figured out which houseplants would produce a similar impact so that they could put those on the space station.
Wow.
That's also in the article. Yes.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And Kathy, what is the URL of your website so that we know?
It's justfortoday.health.
Justfortoday.health? Health.
And that's the way I move through my day. I try really hard not to think about yesterday and not tomorrow. Obviously, that's not mindful. Like, so just for today, it's also the foundation of the 5 sort of foundation, not really prayers, of Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we just focus on today, we're going to live in a space that we actually have a little more control over, right? We can't control whatever happened yesterday. Happened. It's done. Move on. But today I can do better. Just for today, I can choose. And then maybe we mess up at the end of the day. Okay. Wake up in the morning. Just for today. Try it again.
Lovely. Kathy, thank you so much for
That's my
sharing your
pleasure.
story in this conversation.
It's really my pleasure. I appreciate you reaching out.